The cold of the marble floor seeped through the thin fabric of Alara's worn-out dress, a familiar ache in her knees that had become a constant companion. Above her, a constellation of crystal chandeliers cast a fractured, golden light across the grand ballroom, a light that seemed to mock her as she scrubbed away an invisible smudge. Tonight was the night of the centennial choosing, a ball held only once a century to find a mate for the Alpha King of all alphas. 200 princesses from every corner of the known world had gathered, their laughter like the chiming of silver bells echoing from the drawing rooms where they prepared. Alara's world, however, was one of gray soap, bristled brushes, and the sharp, unforgiving voice of the head maid, Beatrice. "Faster, you worthless girl!" Beatrice snapped, her voice cutting through the air like a whip. "The Black Alpha King arrives within the hour. Do you think he wants to see his reflection in a floor smeared with your laziness?" Alara flinched, her shoulders hunching. Worthless. The word was a brand on her soul, seared there by years of scorn and neglect. An orphan raised on the scraps of the palace kitchens, she had no pack, no family, no name worth remembering. She was simply Alara, the servant girl who was good at becoming invisible. She scrubbed harder, her knuckles raw, trying to pour all her frustration and sorrow into the circular motion. She could hear the rustle of silk and the clink of jewels from the hallway. Each sound was a reminder of the universe she could see but never touch. The princesses were like exotic birds, preening their vibrant feathers, each one convinced she would be the one chosen by the legendary Alpha King Kale. He was a figure of myth, a king said to be as old as the moon itself, his power absolute. They called him the Black King, not for the color of his skin, which was a deep, rich umber, but for the color of his wolf, a creature of shadow and night, a beast no one had seen in centuries, but whose power was felt in the very air of their lands. Alara had never dared to dream of such things. Her dreams were small, practical things, a warm meal, a blanket without holes, a single day without a harsh word. Yet, as she polished the floor to a mirror-like sheen, she saw a distorted reflection of a girl with wide, frightened eyes and soot on her cheek. For a fleeting, foolish moment, she allowed herself to wonder what it would be like to wear satin instead of sackcloth, to have her hair braided with ribbons instead of tied back with twine. The fantasy was so sharp, so painful, it brought tears to her eyes. She quickly wiped them away with the back of her hand, leaving a grimy streak on her face. Such thoughts were dangerous. Hope was a poison for girls like her. The great doors of the ballroom were thrown open, and the royal steward announced the princess's entrance. Alara scrambled to her feet, gathering her bucket and rags to retreat into the shadows of the service corridors. She was not meant to be seen. She pressed herself into a small alcove behind a tapestry, her heart pounding as the procession began. Princess after princess swept into the room, a river of color and arrogance. There was Princess Seraphina of the Sunstone Pack, her gown woven with actual gold thread, her laughter loud and commanding. Princess Isolde of the Iron River clan followed, her bearing that of a warrior, a silver circlet on her brow. They were all stunning, powerful, and perfect. They were everything she was not. Then, a hush fell over the entire palace. The air grew thick, heavy with an ancient, untamed power that made the hairs on Alara's arms stand on end. It was a presence that demanded submission, a pressure that settled deep in her bones. Through the main doors strode the Alpha King Kale. He was taller than she could have imagined, broad-shouldered and clad in black leathers that absorbed the light rather than reflecting it. His hair was a mane of tight black coils, threaded with silver that spoke of his immense age. But it was his eyes that captured her, even from her hiding place. They were the color of molten gold, and they swept over the room with a profound, soul-deep weariness. He looked at the 200 beautiful, powerful princesses, and a flicker of disappointment crossed his features before being replaced by a mask of regal indifference. The ball began, a symphony of forced pleasantries and desperate attempts to capture the king's attention. He was polite but distant, his golden eyes seeing through the glittering facades to the grasping ambition beneath. He danced with none of them. He spoke to them in clipped, formal tones. One by one, he would meet their gaze, and a subtle shake of his head was all it took to dismiss them. Alara watched as hope died in the eyes of the most powerful women in the world. She saw their perfect smiles falter, their proud postures slump. They were being weighed, measured, and found wanting. The king, it seemed, was not looking for a queen. He was looking for something else entirely, something none of them possessed. As the night wore on, the air in the ballroom became thick with the cloying scents of 100 different perfumes. It was overwhelming, a chemical fog of desperation. Alara felt a wave of dizziness. She needed fresh air, just for a moment. Slipping out of her alcove, she crept down a deserted corridor that led to a small, forgotten balcony overlooking the winter gardens. The cold night air was a relief, sharp and clean against her skin. A light snow had begun to fall, dusting the dormant rose bushes in a blanket of white. For the first time all night, she could breathe. She closed her eyes, letting the quiet solitude wash over her. This was her world, the silence, the shadows, the cold. It was a lonely world, but it was real. You are not one of them. The voice was deep, a low rumble that vibrated through the stone beneath her feet. Alara's eyes flew open. Her heart leaped in her throat. Standing not 10 feet away, shrouded in the shadows of the balcony, was the Alpha King. He had moved with impossible silence. His golden eyes were fixed on her, not with the bored indifference he'd shown the princesses, but with a raw, startling intensity. She immediately dropped into a low curtsy, her head bowed, her entire body trembling. "Your Majesty, forgive me. I did not mean to intrude. I will leave at once." She began to back away, her gaze fixed on the floor. To be seen by him was a crime. To be addressed by him was unthinkable. "Stay," he commanded. The word was not a request. It was an anchor, rooting her to the spot. He stepped out of the shadows and into the faint moonlight. Up close, his power was a physical force, a storm held in check. He was magnificent and terrifying. "I asked you a question," he said, his voice softer now, but no less powerful. "You are not one of the princesses." "No, Your Majesty," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'm no one, just a servant." He took another step closer. He was studying her, his gaze missing nothing: the threadbare dress, the raw hands, the smudge of soot still on her cheek. She braced herself for the inevitable dismissal, the disgust. It's what she always received from the highborn, but never came. Instead, a strange look crossed his face, one of confusion, of wonder, of recognition. He slowly circled her, not like a predator, but like an art collector examining a priceless statue he'd just discovered in a dusty attic. He inhaled deeply, and his eyes widened almost imperceptibly. The scents of the ballroom, the heavy perfumes, the wine, the desperation, had masked everything. But out here in the clean, cold air, he could finally smell it. Wildflowers after a spring rain, freshly baked bread, and something else, something elemental and pure that called to the ancient wolf within him. It was a scent his soul had been searching for across 500 lonely years. "What is your name?" he asked, his voice a low growl of controlled emotion. "Alara, Your Majesty, Alara," he repeated, testing the name on his tongue. It sounded like a prayer. He stopped in front of her, so close she could feel the heat radiating from his body. He lifted a hand, and she flinched, expecting a blow. Instead, his calloused fingers gently brushed the smudge of soot from her cheek. His touch was like lightning, a jolt of pure energy that shot through her entire being. A gasp escaped her lips. His golden eyes locked with hers, and in their depths, she saw not a king looking at a servant, but a man looking at the other half of his soul. The world fell away. The cold, the snow, the palace, it all disappeared. There was only the warmth of his touch and the shocking intensity in his eyes. "It's you," he breathed, his voice thick with a century of yearning. "After all this time, it's you." Before Alara could process his words, the balcony doors burst open. Headmaid Beatrice stood there, her face a mask of apoplectic rage, flanked by Princess Serafina and Princess Isolde. Their expressions were a mixture of shock and utter contempt. "There you are, you filthy rat!" Beatrice shrieked, her voice shattering the sacred silence. "Interrupting His Majesty! How dare you show your disgusting face to the king?" Princess Seraphina sneered, her perfectly painted lips curling in disgust. "Look at it, Your Majesty. This is the best the palace has to offer in Vermin. I do hope you'll have it whipped for its insolence." Elara shrank back, the familiar terror washing over her, eclipsing the strange, wonderful warmth she had just felt. The world was righting itself. She was the worthless servant, and he was the king. Their moment had been a dream, a fantasy. This was reality. She tried to pull away from him, to drop to her knees and beg for forgiveness. But his hand shot out and gripped her arm, holding her firmly but gently at his side. He didn't even look at the three furious women. His golden eyes remained locked on Elara, his expression softening with a fierce, protective light. "Do not be afraid," he murmured, his voice for her alone. Then he turned his head slowly, and the full, terrifying force of his ancient power descended upon the newcomers. The air crackled. The temperature on the balcony dropped 20 degrees. Beatrice, Seraphina, and Isolde froze, their insults dying in their throats. The king's eyes were no longer just molten gold. They were blazing suns, burning with an authority that could command armies and level mountains. "You will address your future queen with respect." King Kale's voice was deceptively calm, but it held the deadly promise of an earthquake. The words hung in the frozen air, each one a hammer blow against the foundations of their world. "Queen." The word echoed in the cavern of Elara's mind, nonsensical and impossible. Beatrice's jaw dropped. Princess Isolde took an involuntary step back, her warrior's confidence shattered. Princess Seraphina, however, let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. "Queen? Her?" She pointed a jeweled finger at Elara. "Your Majesty, you must be jesting. She is a nameless, packless Omega, a servant. She is nothing." The king's gaze shifted to Seraphina. He said nothing, but the pressure in the air intensified until the princess was forced to her knees, gasping for breath. "You speak of names and packs," Kale said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. "You, who came here hoping to trade your title for my power. You speak of worth. You whose value is measured only in the gold you wear and the lands you covet. You know nothing of worth." He turned his gaze back to Elara, and the crushing pressure vanished, replaced by a warmth that enveloped her like the finest fur cloak. He gently took her chapped, calloused hand in his, lifting it for the others to see. "This hand has known work. This heart has known sorrow. This soul has known kindness in a world that showed it none. While you paraded your jewels and your pedigrees, she was polishing the very floor you walk on, with more dignity and grace than any of you possess in your entire beings." His voice rose, carrying not just across the balcony, but back in the ballroom, where the music had faltered and a crowd had gathered at the doors, drawn by the commotion. "For 500 years, I have searched. I have sat through countless balls just like this one. I have looked into the eyes of thousands of princesses, warriors, and scholars. I have seen ambition. I have seen greed. I have seen pride. But I have never found my mate." He finally looked away from Elara and swept his burning gaze over the stunned crowd. "The moon goddess does not gift us with a mate to strengthen our political alliances or to secure our bloodlines. She gifts us with a mate to complete our souls. She has not given me a princess. She has given me what I truly need: a heart that is strong, a spirit that is pure, and a soul that shines brighter than any crown." He turned back to Elara, his powerful hands cupping her face, his thumbs gently stroking her cheeks. He ignored the gasps from the crowd, the fury in Beatrice's eyes, the utter humiliation on the faces of the princesses. In that moment, they were the only two people in the universe. "You are not worthless," he said, his voice now a tender whisper that healed the wounds the world had inflicted on her. "You are priceless. You are not no one. You are my everything. You, Elara, are my fated mate, my Luna Queen." A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers. The headmaid swayed on her feet, her face ashen. This was not just a rejection of the 200 princesses, it was a rejection of their entire value system, of the rules of power and status that had governed their world for centuries. Alara stared up at him, tears welling in her eyes. Not tears of sorrow, but tears of disbelief, of a hope so vast and terrifying it threatened to shatter her. All her life, she had been told she was less than dust. She had believed it. She had lived it. But the man before her, the most powerful being she had ever known, looked at her as if she were the sunrise. I don't understand, she whispered, her voice trembling. I have nothing to offer you. His lips curved into the first genuine smile he had shown all night, a smile that transformed his stern, intimidating face into something breathtakingly handsome. You have everything to offer me, he said. You offer me peace in a life of war. You offer me light in an eternity of shadows. You are my home, without another word. He lowered his head and gently pressed his lips to hers. It was not a kiss of passion, but of promise, of destiny, a seal on a sacred vow made long before they were born. As their lips met, a wave of golden light erupted from them, washing over the balcony and through the ballroom. The mate bond, dormant for centuries, flared to life, a visible, tangible force. Alara felt it settle in her chest, a warm, steady flame that chased away every last shadow of cold and loneliness she had ever known. She felt his strength, his history, his profound, aching loneliness, and his overwhelming love for her, all pouring into her heart. When he pulled back, the entire palace was silent. Every eye was on them. Alara was no longer hunched or afraid. She stood taller, her hand held firmly in his, the golden light of the bond still shimmering around her. She looked at Beatrice and the fallen princesses, not with triumph, but with a quiet pity. They had been chasing a crown, while she had stumbled into a universe. King Kale kept her hand in his and turned to face the stunned assembly. Prepare the royal chambers, he commanded the guards, his voice ringing with an authority that would not be questioned. My queen is tired. He then looked directly at a pale and trembling Beatrice. You are dismissed from your position. You will be out of this palace by sunrise. Your cruelty has no place in my queen's home. He then led Alara away from the balcony, through the parted sea of shocked aristocrats. They walked past the 200 rejected princesses, whose glittering gowns and priceless jewels now seemed like cheap costumes. He didn't look back. Alara was his world now. He led her through opulent hallways and up a grand staircase, away from the whispers and the stares, until they reached a quiet, private study with a roaring fireplace. He closed the doors, shutting out the world. He led her to a plush velvet armchair by the fire and knelt before her, still holding her hand. The Alpha King of all alphas, on his knees before a servant girl in a threadbare dress. I know this is overwhelming, he said softly. I will give you time. I will answer every question. All I ask is that you believe me. Believe in this. He placed her hand over his heart, and she could feel its steady, powerful beat. It beats for you. It has only ever beaten for you. Alara looked from his earnest, open face to her own reflection in a nearby mirror. She saw the same girl, with the same wide eyes and simple features. But something was different. A light shone from within her, a confidence she had never known. She was not just Alara, the worthless servant. She was Alara, the fated mate of the Alpha King. She was his Luna Queen. She was worthy. She was loved. And for the first time in her life, she was home. If you believe that true worth lies not in status or wealth, but in the strength and kindness of one's soul, then this story is for you. If you've ever felt overlooked or undervalued, remember that destiny has a way of finding the most deserving hearts in the most unexpected places. Like this video if you are cheering for Alara, and subscribe for more tales of fated love and triumphant underdogs. Let us know in the comments what you thought of the king's epic declaration.